Andrew Wilson, king of olive jar openers, debater of OnlyFans models, measurer of Muhammad's manhood, and occasional orthobro, is leading his unsuspecting followers straight into the wide-open arms of a nuclear Antichrist. You heard me correctly. If Andrew Wilson is successful, we will witness the rise of an Antichrist armed with nuclear weapons. People keep making fun of Andrew because he couldn't open a jar of olives. The man's about to open a jar of nuclear Antichrist and pour it all over us. Millions of lives will be lost. Maybe yours, maybe mine, maybe Mike Winger's. All thanks to Andrew Wilson. And I'm about to prove it using Andrew's airtight logic. I strongly suggest you pay close attention lest you join him in aiding and abetting a nuclear Antichrist. In his debate with the apostate prophet on whether Christians should support Zionism, Andrew laid out what he considered his most important argument.
My last argument is the most important. It combines two arguments together for the sake of time. This argument focuses on the biggest ought, not for Christians, and requires a preface. The first preface is that Israel refuses to disclose if it has nuclear weapons and will neither confirm nor deny if they do, nor allow any inspection of them if they do. Our own CIA has confirmed they do, but they don't disclose it.
Israel neither confirms nor denies having nuclear weapons, but it's widely believed that Israel has somewhere between 100 and several hundred nuclear warheads. So, if someone, an Antichrist, for instance, were to seize control of Israel, he or she or Z would most likely end up with a nuclear arsenal.
Second, the Israeli government works hand in hand with the Temple Institute and American evangelicals. Also, there's an organization called CUFI, or Christians Unified for Israel. CUFI has 10 million members, and Israel doesn't even have 10 million citizens. CUFI spreads the false heresy of dispensationalism and hosts charismatic doctrine heresy as well. By Ridvan's own faith, he knows these are heresies. CUFI is on over 300 college campuses and growing. Their stated goal is to educate millions of Americans on these heresies, according to their own website, quote, through our 16 social media accounts, websites, blogs, daily briefs, to bring in groups of pastors and next-generation influencers and students to Israel every year. Guys like Charlie Kirk and, dare I say, Ridvan and David Wood and others. To quote, those would be the types of influencers who would be their target. Not saying that CUFI paid for any of that. I'm just saying that would be the target.
After hearing Andrew's terrifying warning about the sinister organization that's targeting AP and me, I went to CUFI's website. Under mission, we have, as the largest pro-Israel organization in the United States, with over 10 million members, Christians United for Israel, CUFI, is the foremost Christian organization educating and empowering millions of Americans to speak and act with one voice in defense of Israel and the Jewish people. CUFI's diversity across political, ethnic, generational, and denominational lines maximizes our impact in communities, in the media, on campus, and in our nation's capital. CUFI is committed to confronting indifference and combating anti-Semitism in all its forms, wherever it may be found. Christians from various denominations uniting to combat anti-Semitism? What could be more wicked and heretical, said the online alliance of Groypers, Orthobros, Jihadis, and Candace Owens.
Now, what do these people want, you ask? Well, this is going to blow your mind, but this is what they want. They want to assist with the fulfillment of biblical prophecy to bring about a new false Messiah and usher in an Armageddon. Not kidding.
They're trying to usher in an Armageddon? I'm getting ready to take a closer look at CUFI's policy. At Christians United for Israel, we are committed to Israel's strength, security, and sovereignty. To this end, we stand with the decisions of the democratically elected government of Israel and work to support the U.S.-Israel relationship and safeguard the Jewish state's right to defend itself. To be fair, I don't agree with this policy. They say, we stand with the decisions of the democratically elected government of Israel. All their decisions? I wouldn't make a blanket statement about agreeing with the decisions of any government made up of mere human beings. But let's be serious here. Does CUFI sound like a group that's obsessed with ushering in an Armageddon? Andrew made them sound like a doomsday cult.
Now, the Temple Institute's goal in Israel, using both private and Israeli state money, is to rebuild the third temple and name a Messiah, which Christians know is a false Messiah.
The Temple Institute is an organization that wants to build the third temple, but they aren't trying to name a Messiah. The only source I've seen for that is Andrew Wilson's "Trust Me, Orthobro." They don't even seem like an exceptionally large group based on their videos, and there are lots of other religious Jews who reject their views. So, why am I supposed to think that this is going to lead to an Antichrist?
Right now, this second, major personalities on the right, such as Charlie Kirk, most of the Daily Wire, even perhaps David Wood and Ridvan themselves, who I like, know for sure that any Messiah named by Israel will be Antichrist. They know it.
Suppose AP and I and others don't believe that Israel is on the verge of naming some Messiah, and so we don't even think about it. But maybe we should think about it. After all, we have an elegant conspiracy theory from Andrew Wilson. Here's the recap.
So to recap, the supposed secular Zionist government is giving money to the religious Zionists in Israel and get American support to do this with both American government money and direct aid, with mega preachers like John Hagee leading the charge in America with CUFI to back this endeavor to usher in Antichrist. So, Ridvan, I will see any argument you make for why Christians ought to support Zionism, and I will raise you one Antichrist as not.
So, the basic reasoning is, if you support Israel's right to exist and defend itself, you're supporting the rise of an Antichrist. As a Christian, you shouldn't support the rise of an Antichrist. Therefore, you shouldn't support Israel's right to exist and defend itself. This is very strange reasoning, especially if you don't lump everything together like Andrew keeps doing. Let me break this down for you. Jews are currently not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. Around half of Israelis believe that Jews should be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. And there are both religious and secular reasons for this view. There are religious Jews who want to pray on the Temple Mount. There are non-religious Jews who don't want to pray on the Temple Mount themselves, but they don't like the fact that religious Jews aren't allowed to pray there. Everyone combined, around 50% think Jews should be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. Around 30% of Israelis want the third temple to be built. Here again, there are both religious and secular reasons. There are religious Jews who want a temple. There are secular Jews who want Jews to have authority over the Temple Mount. What percentage of Israelis want to build the third temple and name a Messiah? I have no clue, but it doesn't seem to be a huge percentage. In other words, the percentages of supporters drop significantly with each additional step. What percentage of Israelis support Israel's right to exist and defend itself? Vast majority. What percentage of Israelis support the right of Jews to pray on the Temple Mount? About half. What percentage of Israelis support the construction of the third temple? Around 30%. What percentage of Israelis support the naming of a Messiah? Probably a much smaller percentage, and even those who agree with the general idea wouldn't agree among themselves because there are lots of different groups with different beliefs. Andrew, however, lumps some of these things together. He lumps together the goal of constructing the third temple with the goal of naming a Messiah. I'd love to see the source on that. Sadly, Andrew isn't big on sources.
What references should I give you for logical arguments except me?
Trust me, Orthobro. So, until we have a good reason to think that by supporting Israel's right to exist and defend itself, we're actually supporting the naming of a false Messiah, Andrew's argument just doesn't work. But maybe we missed something. Here's the formal version of the argument.
So, the formal argument goes like this. Premise 1, Christians should not support false Messiah or Antichrist. ever. Premise 2, Zionists are attempting to name a false Messiah. Premise 3, secular and religious Zionists are working together to bring about biblical prophecy and name a false Messiah. Conclusion, Christians shouldn't support Zionism, especially not a Zionist nation with an Antichrist at its head and nukes, which it won't acknowledge. False Messiah, head of a state with nukes. Genius, Fridvin!
I agree with the first premise. Christians shouldn't support an Antichrist. The rest of Andrew's presentation, however, didn't give me any real reason to think that by supporting Israel's right to exist and defend itself, I'm supporting an Antichrist. I support the right of the United States to exist and defend itself, even though there are all kinds of groups in the United States with all kinds of agendas that I don't support. I support the right of Canada to exist and defend itself, even though, for all I know, Canada could vote in an Antichrist. Andrew's reasoning here is seriously sloppy and, dare I say, unbiblical. Think about something like the parable of the Good Samaritan. The Samaritans and the Jews were enemies. Both groups believed that the Messiah was coming, and both groups believed that the Messiah was going to be on their side against their enemies. But in Jesus' parable, a Samaritan was walking on the road to Jericho, and he found a Jew bleeding and dying after being robbed. According to Andrew, the Samaritan should have thought to himself, if I help this guy, he might support a future false Messiah. If I help this guy, he might even turn out to be a false Messiah. I don't want to help a false Messiah, therefore I have a moral obligation not to help him. Jesus, of course, didn't use people's theories about false messiahs to argue that they shouldn't help someone in need. Instead, he told his followers to go and do likewise. Help people in spite of religious disagreements. Now, to be clear, if I thought that by supporting Israel's right to exist and defend itself, there was a high probability that I would be supporting the rise of a nuclear antichrist, I would agree with Andrew. The problem is that when I sit back and think, what could potentially make Israel desperate enough to name a false messiah and start a nuclear war, the scenario turns out to be massively different from the scenario Andrew described. What could cause Israel to go nuclear in the 21st century? Probably the same thing that would cause the United States or the United Kingdom or China to go nuclear. Israel would have to be surrounded by their enemies, abandoned by their allies, on the verge of destruction with no other option. If things are going well and they're safe, I just can't see it happening. There wouldn't be nearly enough support from the population or their leaders. But if they're desperate enough and they have to decide between being annihilated or massive escalation, then I could see it happening. But think about this. Andrew is telling 2 billion Christians that they have a moral obligation not to support Israel's right to exist, not to support Israel's right to defend itself. I assume he'd support boycotts to crush Israel's economy. That way, the new Antichrist wouldn't have much funding. And I'm guessing Andrew would support measures to cripple Israel's military, since we don't want the new Antichrist to have a strong military. But wouldn't losing the support of Christians and losing the support of Western nations and losing the ability to stand against the endless attacks of jihadis be far more likely to bring about what Andrew fears? In short, a strong, safe Israel with plenty of friends and allies, no nuclear antichrist. A weak, vulnerable Israel, abandoned by everyone, surrounded by enemies, and trying desperately to avoid a fate far worse than what happened on October 7th, significantly more likely to massively escalate. This means, of course, that Andrew Wilson and his followers are, whether intentionally or unintentionally, part of a global campaign to support the rise of a nuclear antichrist and to usher in an Armageddon. Should Christians support Andrew's diabolical mission? Of course not. What should Christians do? We should support keeping Israel strong, and safe. Now, I'm a simple man, so I'm inclined to support people who are surrounded by jihadis just because I don't want them to be destroyed by jihadis. But since we've got some orthobros watching, I have to explain everything in terms of avoiding a nuclear antichrist. So, here goes. Do you want to avoid a nuclear antichrist and the Armageddon Andrew Wilson is obsessed with causing? If so, you should recognize that entire nations are striving to paralyze Israel's economy. And I'm not just talking about hurting big companies, I'm talking about hurting small family businesses. There are Christian and Jewish small businesses in Israel which take a hit after every terror attack because tourism plummets. Tens of thousands of small businesses closed in 2024 because there was almost no tourism. A company called Artza threw a monkey wrench in Andrew Wilson's plot to destroy Israel's economy by gathering products from local artisans in Jerusalem and Nazareth and Bethlehem and other locations and shipping them around the world in Artza boxes. Just think, you can help stop a nuclear antichrist and get hand-picked treasures from the places where Jesus walked, all by signing up with Artza. You'll get candles, Israeli spice mixes, olive wood carvings, mosaic art, decorations, cosmetics, candy, games, all kinds of things delivered right to your door. Just don't ask Andrew to help you open any jars. There's a new box every season, 4 new boxes every year. I put a link to the Artza website in the description box. Use the promo code DIZZLE to get a discount and to let them know who sent you. And remember, if you don't sign up for an Artza box, you're ushering in Andrew's Armageddon and supporting a nuclear antichrist. Genius, Andrew.